Hey, welcome to Grace Church. We're really glad to have you with us this evening. We've had such fantastic weather here in Northeast Ohio. I hope you've been out enjoying that and doing so safely. We all walked in with masks, but while we're broadcasting, they allow us to take those masks off, and it's not quite so hot when we're doing that, and hopefully you'll understand us better. You know, I'm grateful tonight. I was reading in the Bible this morning, and there's a passage in 1 Corinthians 6, and there's a series of questions where the Apostle Paul says, don't you know? Don't you know this? Don't you know this? And one of the things that he's reminding us of, he says, don't you know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, that you've received from God? You're not your own. You belong to Him. And it was a great reminder for me today to say, God, to think that you, the creator of everything, you've come to live within me the moment I've put my trust in you. You give me strength. You help me to know I'm never alone. You have the resources when I feel like I'm running on empty. And you also, in the midst of craziness in our society and our world today, you're the one who has the answers, and I can trust you, and you give me peace. He's with you tonight, and He's with us as we sing our praise to Him. We're going to do that together, and then I'm really grateful to have police chiefs, two police chiefs that serve in the communities that we have our two campuses, Middlebrook Heights and Olmsted Falls. We'll introduce them in a little bit, but you'll be really glad to meet them as well, and we look forward to a time of interaction. So thanks for joining us tonight. Crank up the volume, sing along with us, and really grateful for the team that we can bring honor to the one who comes to live with us and promises to never leave us. Let's sing together.
Would you sing with us tonight, Grace Church? Come all you weary, come all you thirsty, come to the well that never runs dry. Drink of the water, come and thirst no more. Come all you sinners, come find His mercy, come to the table, He will satisfy. Taste of His goodness, find what you're looking for. For God at the foot of the cross. Jesus is waiting. God so loved the world. We're going to sing of His goodness tonight together. In the morning, before I rise, Your mercy's waiting to bring me life. You're arranging every moment of my day, orchestrating as creation sings Your name. For when I think about the goodness of the Lord, I can't help but lift my hands. I know over me You dance. When I think about the goodness of the Lord, in the shadow of Your hand, rivers flow in desert lands and over sorrows, when everything's broken, when everything's hopeless, You are my rescue, You are my refuge. When everything's broken, yes, You are my portion. All my burdens, all of my burdens, and all of my sorrows. When everything's broken, when everything's hopeless, You are my rescue, You are my refuge. When everything's broken, You are my portion. When I think about the help but lift my hands. I know over me you dance when I think about the goodness of the Lord. In the shadow of your hand, rivers flow in desert lands and over me. And over me. We just sing that chorus one more time together. When I think about the goodness of the Lord. When I think about the goodness of the Lord, I can't help but lift my hands. I know over me you dance when I think about the goodness of the Lord. In the shadow of your hands, rivers flow in desert lands and over me. Let's sing this hymn together tonight. Come thou fount of every blessing. Make this the prayer of our hearts. Come thou fount of every blessing. Tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never cease. Call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mountain fixed upon the mount of thy redeeming love. Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Jesus saw me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God. He to rescue me from danger interposed his precious blood. And oh, to grace, how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness like a fetter bind my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it for thy courts above. All else
Hey, would you pray with me? Lord, thank you that in a day when it seems like we're in uncharted waters, facing challenges that haven't faced before, so many cancellations, and for many people who are tuning in tonight, disappointments, maybe anxiety, uncertainty, we thank you, Lord, that in the midst of all of that, that you are unchanging. You're good. You're faithful. You love us. You listen to us when we pray. And Lord, when we do that, you give us peace. So we pray that you would tune our hearts to be, Lord, closer to you, knowing you better, and following you with all of our hearts. Lord, give us understanding tonight. Thank you for our guests. Pray that they would be honored this evening, and that, and Lord, that it would be a time for all of us to learn. In your name we pray. Amen. So I remember when I was in probably third grade, I went to Berea City Schools, and I remember one time I was at the grocery store, and I'm, what I was maybe 8 years old, and I turn the corner with my mom, and I see my school teacher. And I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. I was sort of embarrassed. I sort of thought she lived at the school. You ever had that experience growing up? Where you see a person in the role that they have, the title they play, the uniform that they wear, but you don't always see that there's a person who has a real family and concerns, and they're sort of, in many ways, like you. And I remember going home that day just going, she's like a real person. And it was sort of this revelation for me. And we want that to happen tonight, in a sense. We're going to be having a conversation with two police chiefs here in the area, Chief Tom and Chief Rogers. And we really want you to get to know the person behind the uniform. And not just for them, but the people they represent, the people who wear blue. Because this is a day and age that we've had a lot of tensions in our country. And one of the dangers is that we can dehumanize. We can see a person for belonging to a group, or they're part of an opposite side, or they're a different political stripe than we are. In some way, they're different than we are, and we put them in a group, or we label them, and we dehumanize them. And this series we've been doing on Wednesday night is called Speak. And what we've been asked to do in the Bible is to speak up. Speak up for the rights of others. Speak up for people who maybe don't have a voice. Speak up when you're with others and you hear them dehumanize someone else. What does it look like for us to represent Jesus well and give great value to every person? Because that's the way God sees all of us. He sees us with great value, and so we want to do the same. So we're going to have this conversation tonight. Invite you to join in. In fact, there's going to be a number on the screen that you can text in questions. We have several that we've prepared, but then we're going to take questions from you. And so if you have something you're like, I have a question that sort of raises for me, you feel free to text it in. We'll answer the ones that we can, and we'll go that route. We're also glad tonight to have in the audience Mayor Matt Castelli. Mayor Castelli's been the mayor here in Middlebrook Heights, and is just in his few years as mayor and then many years as a councilman has had a great impact. And so really glad to have you here as well, Mayor. And in fact, he's going to do a closing song for us tonight. No. So I'm going to invite the chiefs to come on up, and we'll introduce them to you. And thanks so much. Let me get the microphones over here. I don't think, do we have the microphones here? John will get those if you could. That'd be great. All right, good. Well, we're going to get you guys each a microphone here. Welcome to John. John, thank you very much for being our tech person here. Chief Tom, Chief Rogers, thank you so much for spending the evening with us. And thank you for your service to our community. Really, really appreciate your leadership, the ways that you invest in the men and women who have been called to serve on your police forces. I wonder, for starters, if you just tell us a little bit about your family, that you do have a real life outside of the police station. You don't live there, although you might feel like it, or your family might feel like it at times. But Chief Tomby, you first. How about you, your family? Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I've been married for 30 years to my wife Laura, who is a nurse at Fairview Hospital, and we have two daughters, Emily, who's 28 and just married, nice young man, Nick, in September, and then our youngest daughter Natalie is in grad school at Cleveland State University, and we were lifelong City of Cleveland residents. Both of the girls attended Magnificat High School in Rocky River, and we're very proud of them. And we're happy that my younger daughter's back home with us studying for her graduate degree.
That's great. You guys got a connection because you have a daughter at Magnificat as well, right?
I do.
Yes, tell us about your family, Chief Rogers.
So I have been married for 22 years to my wife, Heather. We have 3 children. My oldest son is 19. My daughter is 17, and she goes to Magnificat. And my youngest son is 13. He goes to St. Mary of the Falls in Olmsted Falls. Another common thing, my wife is also a nurse. You'll see that a lot with a lot of police officers. I know several that have significant others that are nurses.
That's great. Pastor Joel and I are going to go back and forth here, and if you're not familiar with Pastor Joel, if you're tuning in for the first time, pastor of the Olmsted Falls campus, and so these officers represent the two communities where we serve. So I'll ask one here for starts and then turn it over to Joel. And question for both of you. You've been at this for a while, serving the community as an officer. Looking back, what prompted you to want to be an officer? Whoever would like to go first.
Go ahead, Chief.
Well, for me, I've been an officer for 35 years, and I have to say it was not a lifelong ambition. Had nobody in my family that was in law enforcement. Got out of college and was working at the Cleveland Clinic, and took myself and a few of my friends went down to Public Hall and took the police and fire test in 1983. The police department called me in 1984, and I started the academy. And really, I guess I'd have to say I never looked back. It was something that I grew into, and I grew to love. I love being a police officer, and I love wearing a uniform and working in the community. So that was, my journey was a little different than people that have had law enforcement in their family. But it was really just, it was time to get a job after college, and this is where I landed.
So almost sort of a lark that you went with some friends to take the test. Did some of them end up serving for a career as well?
I got a couple of my friends that ended up on the fire department. Back then, you could take both tests, and there was quite a few. There was thousands of us down at Public Hall in the city of Cleveland, and a couple of them went to the fire department, and then I was the only one that ended up in law enforcement.
Wow, who would have known? Chief Rogers, how about you? What sort of made you want to, when did you know, this might be my career?
Well, mine was a little more traditional path, I suppose. I was in the military, I was in the Army. When I went into the reserves, I thought it would be a good way for me to get some college paid for. And after doing that for a little bit, I realized that I could also get the police academy paid for by the military, by the Army. And I was an MP in the Army, so it was a natural transition for me. And that's basically how I got into police work, was through the military.
Wow, that's great.
I'm interested. I don't have any police people in my family. That's not what I grew up with. So if somebody asked me, hey, as an outsider, wearing the uniform, what's it like? What are things you love about it? What are some of the challenges that you face every day?
Well, first let me say, I should have mentioned this before. My grandfather on my mother's side was the chief of police in Lexington Township down in Stark County. And for my kind of formative years, I didn't think, oh, I'm going to be a policeman like my grandfather. But I do think that there were things that I learned and were taught without really knowing it that kind of helped lead me to that. And let me also say that I'm so incredibly proud to be a police officer. I know Chief Tamba feels the same way. I put this uniform on every day, and I know I have a great responsibility, but I'm also so very proud of it. And I'm proud to wear this badge, and I'm proud of all the officers that work for me. So I know that doesn't answer your question fully, but
No.
when I think of what it's like to put the uniform on every day, pride and responsibility.
Chief Tom, how about you? What do you most enjoy, and what would you say are some of the big challenges?
I think what I enjoy is interaction with the community and interaction with the men and women of law enforcement. You know, I really have a soft spot for police officers that I've worked with and those that have worked their whole lives in this public service from around the country and around the world. So I really enjoy working with the public and problem solving. You know, if there's a problem, whatever we could do to help out. You know, I always like to say the answer is no problem, we'll take care of that, and then we try to figure out how we can take care of it. So a lot of times our interactions with people are not on their best day, so we have to be very sensitive to that. But I think that's one of the things I like the most is just the interaction with people and the men and women. And the challenges are, you know, the challenges are many, but you know, nothing that we can't overcome. Right now is probably the most challenging time in the 35 years that I've been a law enforcement officer. You know, so I think the challenge is you may not be able to help everybody, but you just do the best you can, and your responsibility to the men and women that work for you is very important also. So I think the rewards are a lot more than the challenges, but the challenges are out there every day. There's something new every day, but I think with the community and with the support of law enforcement, there really isn't nothing we can't overcome.
Yeah. You said this is one of the more, like, most challenging times since you've, you know, been in law enforcement. What is one misperception that people have of law enforcement that you would like to dispel, that you say, and there's probably a lot of them, but if there's one that you say, this I hear a lot, and I'd love to lay this one to rest.
I know that one of the more common, in my opinion, misconceptions about police officers is that we are robotic and do not care. And I'm here to tell you that is not true. I have seen some of the greatest acts of kindness and compassion and generosity from police officers. I could tell you story after story that, by the way, none of those officers would want me to tell, because there's no hidden agenda there. These are people, we are people that care. We care about the communities that we live and the surrounding communities. We would not get up every day, put this uniform on, and go out and subject ourselves to the things that we're subjected to on a daily basis if we did not care. And so that, you know, that's one that always kind of bothers me a little bit. I know it's a challenge to dispel that, but we're human too.
It's good. Not robotic. I like that. Chief Thomas?
Yeah, I think that was, you know, well said. I think that one of the misconceptions is that we may not be approachable. Mm-hmm. So I think that that is a misconception, but that's something that I believe we have to work on also. We have to be the ones to kind of extend that hand and smile and have that first interaction with people. Because I've heard that over the course of my career that, you know, geez, I didn't know it would go like this. I had a different perception. So And that's fine. I mean, you know, our job is to provide that public service. So I think the one misconception in response to the question is that we're not approachable.
Something that you said struck me, Chief Rogers, that a lot of the stuff that happens every day nobody sees. I remember, I think we met with you, the pastors in our community, and Chief Vaniel, and we were talking about opioids and what do we do, and just hearing some of the stories of the things that you guys face every day, and that's not what people see. Recently, what people have seen is what happened in Minneapolis, what happened in Atlanta, what happened in Louisville. I'm just interested, for you personally, how did that affect you? How has that affected morale on your team?
You know, prior to May 25th, if you think about the couple of months prior to May 25th, police officers, several professions, but police officers also, we were being told on a daily basis, thank you. Thank you for being out there during the pandemic. Thank you for going to work every day. Thank you for continuing to put yourself in harm's way while we're on lockdown.
You're essential workers.
We're essential workers. And after May 25th, that completely changed. And the reason I bring that up and I say that is, you asked how it affected the morale, right? And so that's a very difficult thing for people to deal with, particularly when officers know when they see something, whether it's right or whether it's wrong. And officers saw what happened on that day and knew it was wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad to have this opportunity today to talk about this, because I've always said if I ever had a chance to, publicly say something like this, I would. When something like this happens, certainly with respect to the family member of the victim and everything, generally speaking in the public, there is no one more upset or angry than police officers. Because we know that bad behavior represents all of us. And so when we see these things, and when we see them and understand them, it's very, very difficult. And morale takes a hit. And the only way to get through that is to talk about it. You have to talk about it with the officers, you have to talk about it with the community, and you have to do everything you can to open that dialogue. And again, that's why I'm here tonight.
That's great.
Well, one person's action has seemed to change the course of where we're heading in this country. So, but I looked at that, and I agree with the chief. It was, what everybody saw was, the taking of a man's life at the hands of a law enforcement officer, someone in uniform, someone that represents government, someone that has vested power from the government. But, that one person does not represent me, Chief Rogers, or the men and women that serve in law enforcement from, across the country. That's wrong. It was, it was really disgusting, what we saw, and it really changed, our job and our reactions to different people in the community. And but I can tell you, I'm coming to work tomorrow. We're coming to work the next day. When somebody calls at 3 o'clock in the morning, we're coming. We're not going to let that one incident or a series of incidents taint us or keep us from doing. We all took an oath. We all put our right hand up and put our hand on the Bible and swore that we would uphold the laws and the Constitution. So that means a lot to us. I take that very seriously. So without a doubt, the actions of others in this uniform affect all of us. But those of us in our particular communities are just going to keep coming to work and, serving the residents of our communities.
I think your long-term, the way that you both have really been effective in community policing and relationships has boded well for the follow-up that whether in Middleburg, there's been a good relationship with the community. Olmsted Falls, I'm sure, as well. I live in Strongsville. I know the same is true there. And so the long-term integrity can really help to weather some of these storms. We hear about the stresses, and it may be especially now that police officers face on the job. And I've heard just anecdotally that it can be tough on marriages. We see depression and anxiety. And I read this year that there have been 93 law enforcement suicides in 2020 alone. I read that at bluehelp.org. And I'm wondering what the police departments in this area, city officials have in place for the mental health of their officers, because you end up I know as a pastor, I sometimes see things a few hours after they happen. You've often seen them minutes after they've happened. A horrific accident or something like that, and you see and that the trauma of that. And so when someone's facing the challenges to mental health, where do you point them? What kind of things are available for your teams?
Well, first, my department is a very small department compared to a lot of departments around us, and it is both a blessing and a curse, right? Because we know everybody's business, and we know what's going on in the sergeant's family, or this patrolman's son did this, or this, patrol officer's daughter excelled at that. So we know each other very well, and certainly the first step in that is talking with each other. I have very good supervisors that talk with their officers. Now, beyond that, the city does have an EAP, an employee assistance plan. It is through the Cleveland Clinic. It is completely confidential, zero cost to the employee, and it covers things from suicide prevention, mental health issues that you spoke of, financial issues, drug and alcohol issues. We push this program out to the employees of the entire city, not just the police department, as part of their work environment. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up, because you had mentioned some of the things that we see as police officers. We discussed earlier that I still work part-time in our neighboring city, working the road in Olmsted Township. And last year, I was on a critical incident where a young fireman lost his life trying to help off-duty, trying to help a couple people who were in a car crash. And that was a very difficult thing for all the officers there, because that young man, that fireman, was the son of a coworker. And in the aftermath of that, the CURS team, the West Shore CURS team, which is the critical incident response, they held multiple meetings. They reached out to the departments, all the departments that were affected. The departments, of course, then reached out to all the members of the department, whether they were on scene or not, because again, this really hit home. And so that CURS team is a very, very good resource to have, and that's another thing that we use.
Anything you want to add from Middleburg Heights perspective, or from your time in Cleveland?
Well, from both perspectives, my time in Cleveland, we had several line of duty deaths, and we had several suicides. While I was working there, and I was in charge of some of those investigations. But employees assistance, peer to peer, and then the first line supervisor is so important. The sergeant, one day the guy or gal is working the road with the officers, and then he scores real well on a test, and the next day he's a sergeant, the next day he's the boss. So that first line supervisor is really, really in tune with his officers or his shift or his platoon, whatever term you use. So I meet with the supervisors formally every month, but I think it's leadership. You know, I really believe it's leadership. You have to know that there's not a stigma to it. We want you at work, but we want you healthy, mentally, physically, socially, financially. Those are the kind of men and women that we want in our police department. So if there is an issue, any critical incident or any use of force, we debrief it with the officers and we ask them what they could have done different, or if it worked out very well for them, if they have any problems, if there's any issues, they think they need some more training, or they would like to take a day off and maybe talk to somebody. I'm very, very amenable to all that. So as you know, a lot of people suffer in silence, you know, so it's very difficult, especially with our department is mainly men, and a lot of times they're not, they're not the first ones to run out and say, hey, I need to talk to someone, but we try to get rid of that stigma as much as we can, and I do think it comes from the supervisors and then the leadership at the top. So they know it's available, it's out there, and even if they do it and we don't know about it, at least they're doing it and they're helping themselves.
I'm sure, too, the fact, I think you guys have about 54 years of service between the two of you.
Right.
You started when you were like 12.
Yeah.
But there's that sense of you've been there. And Chief Rogers, like you said, if people didn't catch that, you're the chief in Olmsted Falls, but you serve as an officer in Olmsted Township. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so
Right.
you're seeing it from both angles, but from the years of experience, you've seen things that I'm sure you can say, when an officer, he or she goes through this or that, you've probably been there, you've done that, and so that sense of being able to walk alongside, or your first line supervisor being able to walk alongside is huge.
We have the privilege in both our church families of having police officers, people that we love dearly, and it's painful to see the brunt of some of the emotion being swallowed by you guys. A lot of it is around racial things. If in a perfect world you could be on a panel, say, hey, here's some things that we could do to do this better, maybe some changes that you would propose, what might that look like?
Well, for me, I think, it's really kind of basic about the golden rule. We do have this conversation. A lot of times our interactions with people, from traffic to a call for service, they're a negative interaction.
Yeah.
Nobody likes getting pulled over, right? Nobody likes.
That's never happened to me, so I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Nobody likes getting pulled over. Nobody, wants to call the police on their neighbor. Nobody,
Right.
Wants to do that. But, if you can, and at times it can be difficult. But if you treat that person the way you'd want your mom or your sister or a good friend of yours to be treated, I don't think you can. I don't think you can. You can go wrong with that. There is we do have body cameras. So everything is recorded. I was in Cleveland when they implemented those. There was a little bit of pushback, but I think they're the best things going. It holds everybody accountable, and you get to see exactly what the officers are doing, and there's always opportunity for improvement, and then there's always opportunity to give a pat on the back and say, that was, you're doing a great job. That's it right there, what you did. And then it's a teaching moment. Then you could take that video and show that young officer and say, look, you see the patience, the understanding, the empathy, how they're listening. That's what we're looking for. Okay. So I really think we just need to take a little more time and know that we're guardians of our communities. Yeah. We're not an occupying force. We're not the warriors. We're guardians of our community, and we need to be a guardian in partnership with that community. So I think to circle back that, just treating people with, with the respect that you would want, or you would want really someone in your family to be treated that way.
That's good.
So I thought a lot about this question, and if I were on a panel to improve police interaction and with the community, the first thing that I would really want to see is more community leader interaction with the police. And what I mean by that is, come walk a mile with me. And I know that that can't happen on an individual level with every member of my community or people from my surrounding communities. But the people who are organizing these things, who are in charge of these things, come meet with me. Come talk with me. Come talk with my officers. Let's have you do some of the training that we do. And I'm sure that Chief Tamba is either between Cleveland or Middleburg Heights has had the FATS training, the virtual reality training. I would encourage any community member to participate in those kind of things. Take a look at what we deal with and how quickly things escalate, how quickly things turn on us. And I would definitely support that. Another thing, and I thought of it while Chief Tamba was talking about the community. We have about 9,400 people in Olmsted Falls. And we usually have 2 officers on the road. If 9,400 people want to do anything with 2 officers on the road, they can do it. So my point with that is, we police the community because they allow us to. So, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that the vast majority of communities allow and they want law and order and they want law enforcement. I know, I think I heard Chief Tamba say it earlier, about a particular thing. We can do better. We can always do better. I know in my department we can do better on a lot of different things, and we continue to try and do better. But just working with the community and having that dialogue of coming and talking with me, come and talk with Chief Tamba, talk with Chief Fender in Strongsville. If that's your community, go and meet with your law enforcement and have a dialogue and have a discussion. That's how we're going to get through this, and that's how we're going to make our profession even better.
Yeah, build those bridges. What kind of training is, as we see our communities grow in diversity, and so sometimes you're working with people that they're just from different backgrounds than you are, different races, different, maybe some who come into our country as immigrants. What kind of training is available to officers to really give greater understanding and a sense of and I know a lot of we come back to the golden rule, but is there something specific that's done that can help sensitize officers?
Well, there is mandated by the state of Ohio training. And then also, I'm very fortunate. I have a very robust, financially supported training budget, which I use. And the men and women, not only tactical training, but policing in communities of color, policing in diverse communities. When we have, you mentioned immigrant communities, sometimes the perception of law enforcement in immigrant communities in other countries around the world is a lot different than it is here. And it's up to us to educate. That's up to us to do. I came across that a lot while I was in Cleveland. A lot. There's communities that are very closed off, that really don't want any, we're an arm of the government. They don't want the law enforcement or the government in their community.
There's suspicion from the start almost.
Yeah, from the beginning,
Yeah.
which is, we have to understand that. I think the police officers, I've been doing this about 35 years, and I think in the last 10 years, the generation of police officers that are coming into the profession are better educated. A lot of them have military backgrounds. I think they're more accepting. They've grown up in a more diverse and accepting society as society evolves. So I think that's all good. And what's come out of this is me sitting here and me talking to Pastor KJ and a few other people about, hey, there's this training on unconscious bias. Hey, there's this training on, microaggressions. Hey, there's this training, which we really didn't have. We had policies, bias-free policing. We have a policy that states very clearly about how we're supposed to police communities. And but the more training, we have to be open to it, and that's leadership, that comes from the top. So we do have mandated training, and I do see that that training changing for 2021 and beyond as a result of what's taking place right now.
Yeah. Did you want to add something to that, Chief Rogers?
Well, just to echo Chief Tamba, the mandated training that our department has had over the last few years has included cultural diversity, implicit bias, legal use of force, constitutional use of force, crisis de-escalation. These are things that every officer in our departments has had in the last few years. Certainly, we then, bring some other training that's not, state mandated training, sexual harassment awareness training, things of that nature. I agree with Chief Tamba. I think that one thing that we'll see moving forward, which I certainly welcome, is more training in these areas. The financial, I don't want to say burden, but the financial cost of doing that, I don't think I have as robust a training budget as Chief Tamba maybe, but
He's got extra funds if you want to borrow some. Yeah.
if he ever wants to. But when I met with Pastor KJ last week, just in discussing about these kind of things, he brought up some training that we could get through a member here, and it's free, and any opportunity we have to get better, to do better, to be better, we're going to take it because there's always room for improvement. We're always going to strive for that.
That's good. I'll ask one more here that we've prepared, and then Joel, if you want to start looking at the ones that have been texted in,
Okay.
and coming to our computers here. And both of you, chiefs, don't have to answer all the questions coming. You can just go back, ping pong back and forth. But here's one more. If there, people are watching and they're saying, okay, so we're asking you as chiefs, what can be done from the police side to build greater trust? What can the community do? What can people in general do to build greater trust with the communities that, where you serve? And one of the things you said, you wish that some community leaders could come through I think that's where how quickly things escalate, the fast training, I think you said. Right. Are there things that, because you might not be able to have, 9,400 people do that, but there are things that you'd say, when citizens do this is really helpful for us just to build trust and to make us feel like, wow, I love my job.
Well, again, this was another head scratcher, right? Because this is a big issue. This is something that if I had the ultimate answer to, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. But for me, and this is something I spoke about with Pastor KJ, people need, in my opinion, and myself included, need to open our ears a little more and maybe our mouth closed a little more. And what I mean by that is, what I've seen, particularly in the last couple months, is if somebody says something and I don't agree with it, I think they're wrong. And so I want to respond to them. And so I respond to them. And no matter how articulate or compassionate and cogent my disagreement is, it doesn't matter because I disagree with them. And so I'm evil. That's what I have seen. And everybody's ears turn off, and they're no longer willing to discuss whatever the issue was that we were discussing. And I'm so far from perfect. I know that I can do better with those kind of things as well. But I would just encourage the community to maybe start listening a little more to the others. And I'm talking about all sides. And by the way, there's not two sides to this. There's 4 or 5 or 6, right? There's no absolutes here. And if all sides would, in my opinion, be a little more open to differing opinions and differing ideas, us included, we could make a lot more headway into this a lot faster.
It's a great response, both of you. I think that sense of when I hear someone's story, wherever they are in life, if they wear the uniform, if they don't, if they're a person of color, and I hear their story, it can get me into their skin, and I can go, wow, that's what it's like to, I hadn't thought of the challenges. And so, and for you as well, what you face, that's good.
And remember, and one of the main things we're talking about here is race relations. Mm-hmm. I'm a middle-aged white man. I have no idea what it's like to be a young black male. And that young black male has no idea what it's like to be a middle-aged police officer. Until we sit down and talk with each other, until we can open up a dialogue where we're not yelling and screaming at each other. And that's what I would really like to see.
That's good.
This question goes a little bit along, and it's not on the sheet, so you didn't have time to prepare for this. But who is somebody? I grew up strangely in Minneapolis, not far from where that incident happened. But it was a few years ago. I'm not going to tell you how many. But at that time, the community was not very diverse. The high school I grew up in was probably 98% white. So I didn't even think about these things very much. When I was in grad school, one of my professors was from Africa, and he would force us to think about these things. You'd say something, he'd say, why'd you use that word? And was really an influence in my life. Is there somebody that has influenced you, get this question right, who has been a significant influence in your life that shaped your racial awareness? Because a lot of us, like you said, we didn't grow up thinking about these things. Is there somebody that has helped you as your awareness has grown? Did my question make sense?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, for me, I grew up on the east side of Cleveland in a predominantly Italian and Irish white Catholic neighborhood. Went to high school at Benedictine High School on Martin Luther King Drive in Buckeye. And 2 people that had great influence on me was Coach Augie Basu, and his second one is Bishop Roger Grease. And he was my principal when I was there. He was my football coach. And, he said the funeral mass for my father. And when I got to Benedictine High School, I was with a diverse group of men. And, I think sports brought us together, really. I was, where I grew up, I thought it was great. I was not sheltered by any means, but I thought, everybody ate spaghetti on Sundays and everybody did this and and then to go and, hang out with some of these guys at their families, I realized there was a whole different world out there. But I'd have to say those 2 men, by their actions, showed me that the motto at the school is ora et labora, prayer and work. And, you know, that stuck with me. And I try to live by that now. And fortunately, you know, Bishop Roger, I still see him. And he's been a big influence on myself, and I know some of my other friends. So grew up, you know, pretty in an ethnic enclave, but then got to high school, went to college, and definitely opened my eyes up and, you know, broadened my horizons by the examples of those two men.
That's great.
Very similar. I immediately thought of two men, but completely different in the sense of did not know them very long. And both men were police officers in the department that I'm still with, Olmsted Falls. Back 15, 18 years ago, we had we still have a reserve program where we would bring somebody on as a police officer, and they were not paid, they were a volunteer, but they were a full authority and powers of police. And both were African American men. Both moved on fairly quickly to bigger and better, brighter things. I don't mind saying their names at all. One is Hasim Welch Bey. He's currently a police officer with North Olmsted. Just a very, very good police officer and a very good man. I did not grow up in a very diverse community. Olmsted Falls is not a very diverse community. And so when Hasim was with us, it was a little eye-opening for me. And then the other man was Joseph Gibson, Joe Gibson, black man that worked with us for a short time, moved on to a bigger and better thing, and bigger and better, excuse me. And I just heard from him about 3 weeks ago. He emailed me. He had went out to Maryland to be a police officer out there. He sold back his military time and retired. And he asked me if I would consider bringing him back. Him and his wife are moving back to Ohio. He asked me if I would consider bringing him back onto the police force as a reserve. And, I was very excited at that opportunity because, again, another very good policeman, very good man. And, I did, make sure to tell him that, as long as everything went okay out in Maryland, and but yes, I'm actually meeting with him tomorrow That's afternoon. Great. So those were the two men that I thought of right away.
I'm just a little troubled by something you said. You said these guys were in Olmsted Falls and then they went to bigger and better. Because when Jonathan invited me to come to Olmsted Falls, he told me that's as high as you could go.
I have one that came in here. Someone asks, what steps do you take in your own life to prevent you from becoming hardened to the human conditions you face every day? Chief Tomba, you made an interesting point. You said, we tend to see people not on their best day, something like that. I like the way you said it. You said it very graciously. But when you're seeing that over and over again, what steps do you take to prevent you from becoming hardened to the human conditions you face every day?
Well, I'm very fortunate. I have to give credit to my wife, Laura, who really kind of puts things in perspective for me. But I would be lying if I didn't say it affected me. I think it does, and it did. Either consciously or unconsciously. But some of the steps I take are, I love going on vacation, with my family. I love being with my friends.
Yeah.
I have lifelong friends and family. So I think if you have something outside of this, because no matter what, this is who we are. At times in your life, you reach a certain status. And I think I'm more than a police officer. I think I'm a good husband, a good father, a good friend, a brother, a son. But my obituary is going to say former police chief. No matter what I do in my life, it's going to say former cop. you know, and that's what it is. I'm very proud of it, but I think I'm a lot more than that. So I think the good support system at home and outside of this, you do have to try to turn it off. It can be very difficult, you know, but you do have to try to disconnect. So I think, you know, a supportive family. I do like to exercise and walk. I think that helps, and I think staying in touch with my spirituality. You know, I'm a Catholic, and you know, I'm not afraid to say, you know, sometimes it's good just to go pray for a minute, close the door at the office, or, you know, stop on the way home. And easy for me to say while we're in this beautiful setting here.
No, but it's true, I'm sure.
But it is true. So I think, you know, family, faith, you know, working out a little bit, exercise, and just being away from, you know, being the problem solver all the time.
Good.
So
That's good.
Ditto.
Okay, ditto, that's good. Yeah, you both have great families, yeah.
And I would just like to say, you know, we do see people sometimes on their worst day, but that is oftentimes tempered by seeing some people on their very best days. And sometimes that can happen on the same shift, if not within the same few hours. You know, I know police officers that have delivered babies. I know police officers that have assisted fire departments in putting out fires and pulling people from, and just the thankfulness. And I know police officers, myself included, that have, you know, helped with the Cops and Kids programs and things like that. And so, yes, there are things that we do. We lead, Chief and I, faith-based lives, and we lean on our spouse quite a bit. But we also see a lot of the good things too.
Yeah, that's good. How about two more questions, Joel? You want to pick one, and I'll pick one that have come in here. We've got quite a few, but
All right.
just take two more.
I'm going to read this so I get it right as it was asked. What suggestions would you chiefs suggest for us? How do we protest violence against a fellow man without showing disrespect to those who are our protectors? We don't believe that every officer is complicit in any way, but want to support our brothers and sisters who are suffering and at the same time show respect to those serving our community. So what is the best way in this context to come alongside them but yet show respect?
go ahead, Chief.
Well, first and foremost, peaceful protest is always acceptable to us. It should be acceptable to anyone. Doing those kind of things without violence, without looting, without rioting, without expletive-laden tirades to the officers that are out there to protect those people during those protests, that's a good start. That's a good start. Certainly, communicating, like I said earlier, if you want to stand by your brothers and sisters who you believe are being oppressed or being marginalized, I would strongly suggest that you come and talk with the people who you believe that's happening with. Yeah. Whether it's your city leaders, your police department, your congressmen, your senators, make your voice heard. And there's more ways to do that than just standing in front of the police station with signs, which again is still a very viable way to get the attention of the people you want, whose attention you want to get.
That's good. Joel, you've probably had a chance to read through a few more of these that have come in. Did you have another one that you were leaning toward there?
I don't, Jonathan.
Okay. I'll just pick one here. Young people who are eager to see change happen. Well, this is probably, you just sort of answered this. How would you motivate or direct their passion? Maybe I'll ask this one. From the first day you joined the police force until today, what improvements have you witnessed in police training and policing?
Numerous in the last 35 years. The training is much better. I can actually remember the first diversity training that we had in 1992, and my first assignment in Cleveland was the 6th District over on the east side, and I was assigned to 105th and St. Clair to Superior, over to 55th and Huff. And, it was a very challenging time. It was the middle of the epidemic of crack cocaine. There was a lot of violence. There was a lot of poverty. It was very, very busy, and we were just, going from call to call, and really didn't have a whole lot of time to engage the community. We really just kind of took care of business and moved on to the next thing. And I think out of that came a more streamlined approach to policing. Our equipment's gotten better. Our training has gotten a lot better. And, our training used to be 8 hours. That was it. We had to go for 8 hours a year. And that was it, extra 8. And usually it was 2 hours of report writing, 1 hour of handcuffing, 1 hour of search and seizure, and really that's all it was. It really was not as extensive as it is now. And that's grown to 40 hours, and I think it's even going to go further than that. So I think the profession and the culture as a whole has changed dramatically for the better, but things change really fast, and we have to keep keep up with it. But I think this generation of younger officers is very, very adaptable to change. They're not as beholden to the old traditions of law enforcement and policing as some of the guys that trained me that were hired in the 60s and 70s. So.
Yeah. Chief Rogers, anything you would add to that? Improvements
The only thing I would add is that the biggest change I've seen is the online training, which can be very beneficial. Now everybody has budget issues. The pandemic has certainly not helped with that. Municipal funding is way down, and departments across the state, across the country are making cuts wherever they can. And unfortunately, a lot of times training is one of the first things. And so we rely more heavily on the online training because an officer can do that on shift. Between calls from the MDT, from the computer terminal in their vehicle, on station, and some of those things are very. It's just fine to do online. Now there's some training that you just can't do online, but when I first started, there was none of that, and now at least it's another option that we have to try and get as much training as we can.
That's good. I'm going to ask Joel to pray for in a second, but I just have one. We love humor around here. You mentioned delivering babies. Is there one situation you look back on years of policing when you talk to your kids or you tell, like, this is one of the wild things I did as a police officer that you're allowed to say publicly? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Most of them I probably couldn't say publicly. There is one that comes to mind. It was probably one of the more fulfilling moments in my life, not just in my career. We had a call of a young man on a bridge in our city that wanted to end his life. We got called out there. I responded. Units had shut down the bridge. And when I approached him, he was laying under the guardrail, kind of. All he had to do was kind of roll over. And I just had a dialogue with him and was able to convince him to at least come off of that ledge to just sit and talk to me. I promised him that I would not grab him, I would not force him, but if you just come off that and sit here and talk with me for a little bit, I promise you we can get through this. And after a little bit of time, he did, and I kept my promise. I didn't grab him right away, and we sat there and talked for a little bit, and eventually I convinced him to walk to the squad. This was several years ago, and I think about it all the time.
Wow.
It's a very, very fulfilling time for me, and it reminds me, whenever I think of it, it reminds me of why I got in this profession in the first place.
Wow. Saving a life for sure. Chief Tom, anything that you look back
Well, yeah, I mean, I have numerous, but the one that stands out is, and it reminds me of just how great the human spirit and the survival instinct is when the three girls escaped from Seymour Avenue.
Yeah.
I was involved with that investigation from the very beginning, and for that to take place and for me to be a part of it, I was in my office. I got a call. I didn't believe it, so I drove over the Detroit Superior Bridge, and I saw Gina's mom, Nancy, and she was running down the street yelling. I took her in the police car. We went to Metro Hospital, went through the doors with Nancy, her sister, and myself, and I was standing there when she saw her daughter for the first time, Gina. Wow. So, I've had numerous, but I can remember that day. It's been documented in a couple of books, but I remember that day vividly. It was myself, her aunt, a nurse, and Gina. There was 4 of us standing there, and it was definitely a moment I'll never forget. And it just reminded me about how strong the human spirit is. Out of this tragedy came new life for these 4 young women. So I think that's one that is going to stay with me for a long time.
Thank you both for being here tonight. Really, really grateful. We want to say thank you to Pastor KJ. Pastor Kajavius, who's built relationships, and you both mentioned him, and we've had an ongoing good relationship, and I want to thank you for helping to arrange this time. And Pastor Joe, would you pray and just thank God for these guys and for the departments that they represent?
Jesus, thanks for being here with us. Thanks for this conversation. Thank you for Chief Rogers, Chief Tomba, for the teams that they represent. We ask that you would bless their families, that in this really tense time, that you would protect them, protect their teams. Also, for all of us to grow in our awareness, as Chief Rogers said, that so often we just don't take the time to sit and talk with each other. And that some of the tension that is there now, that we don't want it to just go away. We want to learn from it and learn to love better. Thanks for this conversation, and pray for all those who serve in law enforcement in our communities across this country as this conversation is happening, that you would extend mercy. Thanks, and we ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Hey, thank you for joining us tonight. We're really grateful you tuned in for this conversation, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon, okay? God bless you tonight.